48 minutes is all that separates 3 or 4, if you're counting the outside area of Acadiana, from a trip to the Superdome. Good evening and welcome to KATC and the Daily Advertiser's Prep Insider. Kevin Foote, Travis Webb, here to break down the 4 big games in the Acadiana area, all semifinals and all in relative close distance to the area, which is something that we haven't really seen in a while. But first game up on tap, Acadiana-Destrehan, a rematch of the 2007 5A state championship game, and another game kind of kin to that, 2 really good offenses just going toe-to-toe.
Yeah, back then, Destrehan was just killing everyone.
Jordan Jefferson.
They just had, and the thing was, could Acadiana keep up with them? I think it's a little more of an even matchup now, and I think if you listen to Destrehan, they're trying to, play we're the underdog kind of deal, and maybe they are a little bit, but even in that game, it ended up 41-21. But if you, I'm sure you were at that game. Acadiana was starting to control the clock. They had cut it to 1, and they were about to get the ball, and there was a key fumble on a punt that they didn't get in, and they never really got caught up again. But back then, even then, as good as Destrehan was, and Coach Davidson would tell you that's about as good a front seven as he's ever faced, they still were able to move the ball and put up 20-some points. So it should be very interesting this time around. Destrehan, if they hadn't had to forfeit the game, would be the #1 seed. This might have been a state final. Who knows? But this really is a great matchup.
It really is, and you look at Destrehan, the quarterback is the one that really kind of has most eyes turned towards him. Donovan Isom, a 6'5" quarterback, committed to Utah. Coach Davidson said something pretty interesting. He said, both teams with Barb, as you see here, and with Destrehan, 2 teams that like to pass the ball a lot, but as to, Keenan Fontenot, maybe the Johnny Manziel, Coach liked Isom to more of a Dante Culpepper, a big guy going to stand in the pocket, can run, and maybe get some momentum with him to chew up the yards. So I think that's interesting that they've had a passing offense kind of 1 week ago. A guy like Trey Quinn, Ronald Broussard, that's a great primer for him, to where I think Acadiana's defense is kind of mentally where they need to be.
They are. I think the big difference here is so much. While he's a great quarterback, they still lean on their running back a little more than Barb leans on their running back, especially once Barb's running back got hurt. So they're going to have to stop the run, and the key, I think, for this game is going to be how many people are they going to have to put in the box to stop the run, to keep to where if they put too many in the box, and with the speed receivers and a big quarterback that can throw down the field, they can really get burned. So it's going to be a matter of keeping Destrehan's receivers in front of them, making them earn their yards and not give up big plays while Acadiana tries to go down the field on Destrehan, and you would think they'd have really good success. Destrehan is used to seeing spread teams, not used to seeing option teams or anything like the Veer. So you got to like Acadiana's chances of moving the ball as long as they don't turn it over like we always say. I think it's going to be Destrehan's big plays against Acadiana's running game, so it'll be interesting. And
we talk about it every single year in the playoffs, and even leading up into this postseason. Kind of really the X factor for Acadiana is the fact that no one in the New Orleans area sees an option, sees a Veer time and time again, to whereas Barb probably was a worse matchup for Acadiana this past week just because Barb sees them every year. Destrehan, kind of to your point, not only are they a young team, but it's a team that's never seen the Veer. That can cause some serious problems.
I would think it would, definitely. And Acadiana did a great job last week in not turning over the ball against Barb, which is what they have to do against a very explosive offense. And they're going to have to not turn it over again, but I would think that their running game would be even more effective than it was last week.
For me, this game really starts and ends with Edward Cormier offensively, not turning over the ball, and you saw what he can do in the Barb game defensively with two huge interceptions, and that's going to be big. You see it time and time again with a kid like Edward. His abilities on both sides of the ball can be such a difference in this game.
Yeah, I think he's a college defensive cornerback, and he proved that again last week. The other thing that I like about Acadiana in this matchup than the 1-07, Acadiana's defense is better. They're playing better defense now than they were. They're dictating more things here, so you got to like their chances.
Moving on down to 2A, we jumped from 5A all the way down to 2A. And Acadiana's offense has been enrolling, and so has Louisville. The Tigers, a 70-point thrashing of Welsh. We both were there.
Yeah.
There's a 21-14 game at half, and then the Tigers just put it in overdrive and really never looked back. Now it sets up the first semifinals home game at Tiger Stadium in Louisville. Talked to Trent Delahousie this week. I mean, they're expecting an atmosphere unlike anything.
And it is a cool atmosphere.
It is.
I like
it's one of my favorites because it's
a
very
good place to
intimate.
be.
It's on top of you. You have the billboards where you're really kind of in a cage. And so I'm looking forward to this game a lot.
That should be fun. You know, it was interesting last week, the game that the Welsh game you were referring to. It was kind of like the reverse of the Catholic game where it was close, and then all of a sudden a close game just became a totally out-of-hand blowout. And you know, there you see Rashid. He was hurt in two rounds ago, and his brother Raymond just took over. I mean, they couldn't stop him. He threw for over 200 and ran for over 200. And you would think a team like Manny, a little more athletic than Welsh, she's going to have a tougher time running for that many yards. But, you know, I was impressed. I think Loreauville showed good depth at wide receiver. They didn't have they didn't replace Rashid, but, you know, their passing game was very credible in that game, and I think they showed good depth at receiver.
What's interesting for Manny is it's a wing T team, but really doesn't run the wing T. Welsh ran the veer, and so that's something that the Loreauville defense is going to get to see again. And kind of like Edward Cormier, Raymond is going to probably have double duty of playing offense and defense. And like Edward, I mean, he's the difference maker. He's the guy that will either win this or lose this for Loreauville because really everything is going to be counted on him, especially with Rashid out.
Absolutely, and I thought their defense, look, they faced a really good running back last week.
Oh, yeah.
In Welsh, and so they gave up some yards, but you know, that was to a really good running back, and I thought overall the defense made big plays when they needed to, and they'll need to force some turnovers. They scored twice last week. That wouldn't hurt this week against a Manny team.
It'll be interesting because this Manny defense, for those of you folks that are not really familiar with Manny, they run a 3-3-5. Basically, imagine the old 1985 Bears defense. 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, 5 across on the back end, all man-to-man. Those 6 up front, they're blitzing the whole time. And so,
like Patterson.
And so, really, a guy like Raymond, I think, benefits well in this because more than likely he's going to have a linebacker on him. You know, obviously there's some formations that you have to kind of tinker with to try to get as many athletes away from the play as possible. But Raymond Bonnet could have a huge game again for Loreauville.
I can imagine the defense that you're describing. While the Loreauville coaches were watching film, they were thinking, man, I wish I had Rashid this week against this defense.
Yeah, because picks and yeah. But with guys like Davion Simon, he stepped up last week. Antoine, they have some playmakers. It's just not going to be the names that we've seen the first 11 weeks of the season.
Right.
But it's really kind of an embarrassment of riches for Louisville right now. They have speed everywhere, height, they have athleticism. I really kind of like Louisville's chances, and I really think that home field is going to be a huge advantage this week.
Oh yeah, you definitely. You know, I don't think too many people would be picking Loreauville if they have to travel to Manny, so it gives them an edge, no question.
The third team, at least intimately here in Acadiana, the number 1 seed in Division 4, Vermilion Catholic, faces Cedar Creek. Cedar Creek defeated St. Ed's handily last week on the road over in Monroe. Now Cedar Creek comes here to the Acadiana area to face Vermilion Catholic. This is a rematch of the regional round last year. VC won 40-7, and to be honest with you, even though this is a semifinal game, I think it might be a similar result.
Well, I wouldn't, put it like I said. I think we both thought Vermilion Catholic was going to win the state championship. Nothing has changed my mind about that. I still think they're going to win the state championship. Is it going to be 40-7? I don't know. It wouldn't shock me. It sounds like Cedar Creek's a little better offensively than they were last year, but no, I think this game's not going to be nearly as close as the first 2 we talked about.
What makes, just in your estimation, I haven't really been able to see VC much this year. I know with Gale and Campbell, but what makes this team maybe different than the last 2 years? Because they were in the quarters, they're in the semis. I know they don't have West St. John or Haynesville.
Yeah, well, then you don't have to play in West St. John or Haynesville.
What makes this team maybe a little bit different?
Well, I think I think they are probably a little better on the line of scrimmage. They've played some really good teams.
Mm-hmm.
That Welsh team we talked about, they went to Welsh and won in week 2. So in addition to beating Catholic High in New Iberia, who was almost in the state finals. So, I think they're more physically minded on the line of scrimmage, and they play just enough defense to complement an offense, which you can have a running back you can throw and run, and then you have just an elite receiver. So, and a quarterback who's not the biggest guy, doesn't throw the furthest, but he's heady and he makes big plays. Yeah. So I think they're just a little bit more of the complete package.
What really amazes me about VC is you lose a guy like Jacoby Davis, who arguably was, for me, one of the best pure athletes I've seen here in a really long time in the area for what he can do, and they haven't missed a beat. And then that blows my mind.
well, Campbell doesn't have quite the speed of a Davis, but he makes big plays. I mean, they just throw. They're just better than everybody there.
So we'll see if VC can make it back to the Dome for the first time since 2003. And oddly enough, my Notre Dame Pioneers were also in the Dome. In fact, the Vermilion Catholic that year played West St. John. Our fourth and final game, kind of on the outer tier of Acadiana. Two teams on the outside, but both playing in somewhat local districts. Jennings making a semis berth for the first time since 1992, facing Livonia, a team that by the skin of their teeth got past Church Point over in Church Point. But for Jennings, it's a team that, a couple of years ago with, Bryson Abraham and the running backs they had, we kind of knew a lot about what they had. We don't know a whole lot about Jennings, at least here locally, but I do know one thing. A win against Patterson is pretty darn impressive.
Yes.
And with a Veer that
2 touchdowns
is now, I think it's in its 5th year. As we've seen with Acadiana, the more and more you get this Veer, you get these younger guys immersed in the freshman and JVs programs, it starts to really start clicking, and that obviously seems to be the case.
Right. I mean, it's the magic of the Veer, and the magic is when you have great athletes, you can be great. But you can be really good even when you don't have great athletes if you run it right. And Acadiana did that for years, and in the years that they have really special athletes, they really go a long way. And this is a team that, like we talk about it, defenses struggle with it. And it's just obvious. I mean, if they just, you talk about the cliches of walking on the field and looking at a team. I mean, this team was in the Jamboree. People came out, Jennings don't look too good this year. Yeah. But if you just keep running the Veer and keep running the Veer, defenses don't do a good job with it, and they just keep winning. I didn't think they'd be this far, but you got to give them credit.
Hey, you know what? I will give them credit because I believe I said they would be around here this time.
Yeah.
So I will pat myself on the shoulder for that one. But for Jennings, you have to really like the matchup, especially with what Church Point did. I mean, a PAT aside, more than likely Church Point's winning this game.
Right.
And so for the Wing T team, I know it's kind of apples and oranges with the Wing T and Veer, but a run-heavy offense, I think, has proven to give Livonia problems, and so that could be the difference this week.
No, I kind of, you're right. I mean, I didn't know about Livonia as the number 1 seed, but they're here. And I've been downgrading Jennings for, the whole bracket, but it wouldn't surprise me if Jennings won this game.
So we could see a 4-pack in the Dome. All have really good chances. As we said, Jennings, first time in the semis since '92. Louisville, their first time since '99. Acadiana, first time since 2010. And VC, their first time since 2011. And so 2 teams with some semifinals experience, relatively recent. 2 teams looking to make a run to the Dome for the first time in a while, or in Louisville's case, the first time ever.
And no long trips, so that's great for area fans.
And area sportscasters as well. So make sure to watch Friday Night Football, an abbreviated edition. Around 10:15, we'll have all 4 games for you, highlights, as well as post-game reaction. Make sure to tune into the Daily Advertiser on Saturday. Kevin, Eric, and the whole crew will have a full game recap, and then we will get set for 9 state championship games.
It's amazing.
A triple header for 3 straight days, but hey, title's on the line, and there's something to be excited about.
Absolutely.
So make sure to head out to a game on Friday. Plenty of action here locally. 3 home games. You have Livonia and Jennings over in Livonia. For Kevin, I'm Travis. We'll see you next week.